Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're gonna do tips for successful breastfeeding. So this is like if you want to start breastfeeding, these are some tips and things to follow to help you have a successful breastfeeding journey. I am going to be looking down a little bit because I do have my textbook that I'm going to be kind of pulling from. I'll also be pulling just from like my own experiences and from another book too, Breastfeeding Answers Made Simple. You can find this on Amazon. The other textbook is Breastfeeding and Human Lactation. That one I think you can find on Amazon, but it's very expensive. This one is $12, $13 or something, so it's a little bit more affordable for the general public. So if you're kind of like a book person, those are things I'm kind of pulling from, and like I said, I'll also be pulling just like personal kind of experiences. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. I am almost 24 weeks, no, I'm 24 weeks pregnant with our third boy and due in mid-July. And I have a breastfeeding and pregnancy related YouTube channel, and we would love to have you subscribe and come along. So I'm just gonna jump into the tips for you guys. So I think the first tip for successful breastfeeding is education. And so that's why I brought up at the beginning of this video the books that I'm referencing. If you don't know how to do something, a lot of times we go online or we go to a bookstore, we go somewhere to find that information on how to do whatever it is that we want to do. But when it comes to breastfeeding, lactation, or even pregnancy and birth, a lot of times we don't go anywhere. We just are like, yeah, I'll just kind of watch, you know, a couple things on Instagram, or just ask, you know, a couple questions from my friends and stuff like that. I feel like we don't do enough self-education in pregnancy and lactation. So my first tip that I think is the most important tip is educate yourself on breastfeeding, on pregnancy, on labor. Get a hold of some books, follow a breastfeeding channel or like an Instagram account. But really, like, if you want to have a successful breastfeeding journey, the best place is books. Like that's just my opinion, but like books or, you know, Kindle reading, just getting that type of education is really, really important so that you have a really good foundation for breastfeeding, so that when you're like, wow, this isn't working, and you're like about to cry and die, essentially, you kind of have something to fall back on. You could be like, oh, I remember I got that book. I'll just pull that out and you can reference it. Another really good book is The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding by La Leche League. It's really like easy to read and it's like an easy reference. I'll have everything linked below, but that's like another really good book. That's my first tip, is educate yourself as much as you can on breastfeeding. So the second thing is right after you deliver, you want to get the baby skin to skin and to nurse within an hour after delivery. That way you create another foundation or another stepping stone in breastfeeding in your breastfeeding journey. You want to get that skin to skin right away, and you want to get them to latch within an hour or so of your birth. Obviously, like sometimes things happen and you're not gonna be able to do that. Like say you have a C-section, or say there's a complication with baby or a complication with you and you can't do that. One of the biggest things you can do in your birth plan during your labor is inform the medical staff that if you can't do skin to skin, have dad or your partner or really anybody do skin to skin as quick as possible if you can't do it. That will also help breastfeeding start off on a really, really good foot. And sometimes you can't do that, and sometimes baby has to go to the NICU and they have to be there for weeks or months sometimes. The best thing that you can still do for breastfeeding in that situation is do as much skin to skin as possible, stimulate your breasts with pumping, and you want to be with baby as much as you can and get that skin to skin. They also call it with the preemies is kangaroo care, which is super, super important, and your medical staff can help you do that even when baby's hooked up to a lot of different tubes and monitors because they're in the NICU, you still can do skin to skin. So definitely, you know, look into that and mention that to your medical staff if you feel that you won't be able to do skin to skin right away. But the benefits of skin to skin right away is that it regulates baby's heart rate, it regulates their temperature, and they also feel the bond between mom and baby. There's a huge oxytocin release after birth, which is the love hormone. So that's also what helps just keep all that love and warmth and comfort right here and calm them as well, because the birth is kind of traumatic. I mean, their head's like getting, you know, like shoved through a very small area, and it really does help to be comforted here. And that first latch is not necessarily going to be perfect. It totally could be, it may not be, and that's okay, but just to get them on the breast within that first hour after birth can really help solidify your breastfeeding journey. Another thing is to make sure that you're not giving your baby any water or unnecessary formula or supplements right after delivery. That being said, if there is a complication or some type of medical issue and baby does need supplementation, I highly encourage looking into donor milk before using formula, because breast milk is liquid gold and formula is artificially made. Baby doesn't need water or like sugar water or anything directly after birth unless there is a medical reason. If there is no medical reason, baby should only be getting the colostrum. You can also pump your colostrum and spoon feed or cup feed if baby is too tired to nurse, which does happen after long labors sometimes. You know, keep that in mind, and that's where kind of the education comes in. If your medical staff is mentioning, oh, you know, baby seems really tired and you're noticing that latching isn't going well and nothing's really happening, you can pump colostrum and then feed baby with a spoon or a cup, and the medical staff will be able to show you how to do that. And that's where that education comes in, where if you know to do that, then the supplementations don't start coming in unless for some reason you are somebody who doesn't produce breast milk, and then you either have to use donor milk or formula, which is totally something that does happen. So the other thing that a lot of people I think realize is rooming in, and that's just where you're still doing skin to skin. Nobody's really interrupting baby. If there's any medical procedures that need to happen after birth, they can all be done while baby is directly on mom's stomach or dad's stomach or partner's chest. You know, it's still like keeping that close bond, you know, not interrupting mom and baby, supporting them, getting them what they need. That's really when the partner comes into play is, you know, what do you need, or what can I help with? That's like a big time for a partner to come in and help with that, because they also support breastfeeding by going to get mom a cup of water or another blanket or a pillow, whatever it is, that's supporting breastfeeding, because while they're going to get that item or whatever it is she needs, mom is still with baby and not separated. Or if mom does need, you know, to take a shower or something, partner can take that time, skin to skin, or cup feed, bottle feed, whatever it is, and still keep that bonding with breastfeeding. Oh, and I did also want to mention, if you are someone who can't breastfeed because of a medical issue, you can still chest feed or breastfeed. There's this tool called an S&S, and I'll see if I can put a picture of it here. And you can put formula or donor milk into it and attach a little like plastic kind of tube that'll go right next to your nipple, and baby can latch on and nurse, but not actually get milk from your breast. It would get it from this either little device, and that way you're still experiencing breastfeeding. They're still getting that skin to skin on their cheeks and, you know, the rest of their body and how you're holding them. So there are options for people who can't breastfeed because of medical, issues or they have an extremely low supply, you can use an SNS. It's also really great for those who have low milk supply as well. Another really big thing is breastfeeding on demand. And what that means is you offer the breast when the baby displays hunger cues. So crying is actually a late hunger cue. One of the earliest hunger cues is when they start stirring, when they're sleeping like this and they're moving their head. Another one is when they're bringing their fists up to their mouth, like they're kind of, eating their hands. Also just stirring kind of in general in those first couple of days, couple of weeks. But crying is actually considered a late hunger cue and can also lead to breastfeeding issues if you're constantly waiting till they're crying to feed them. They're at this point now where they're like starving, and that's why sometimes at the breast there's a lot of crying and pulling away and just frustration with breastfeeding between mom and baby. So if you try and catch those hunger cues early, you can really eliminate a lot of that frustration that can happen at the breast, which in the long run keeps supporting breastfeeding. So another hunger cue is rooting as well, where they kind of open their mouth like that on both sides. Usually you'll know when they're full, when their hands are open. A lot of times they'll have one hand kind of open like this. For some reason it always seems to like go over their chest, but their hands will be open. They will either be alert and quiet, like looking around for a short amount of time. So definitely breastfeeding on demand, meaning you want to feed them when you see those hunger cues. Don't time your feed unless there's some medical reason. If there's some medical reason that you need to feed this baby every 2 hours or something, or every 10 minutes, whatever it is, if it's a medical reason, by all means, listen to that medical advice. I'm not a medical professional, but not yet. But you want to nurse them until they're full, and if they fall asleep at the breast, that's fine. Once they wake up again, offer them the other side. Don't get into the habit of being like, okay, it's been 15 minutes, they're done on this side, and they're still nursing. No, you want to let them nurse on that side for however long that they're comfortable, or till you see those full signals of, the open hand, the relax, and then, offering the other side if they wake up. Or a lot of times, like as they get older and you're nursing on one side, they will kind of like pull off and sort of be like, where's the other side, and you'll learn to read their cues. Feeding on the clock isn't necessarily bad, it's just not natural. Feeding on like a timed schedule is really not natural, and can sometimes hurt the milk supply. That being said, if you have a sleepy baby and there's a medical reason, like if your baby is just constantly sleeping, like there's not, you put them on the breast, they instantly fall asleep, and they're not gaining weight very well, that's when you kind of start getting into those timed feeds. I'm not going to go too much into details on that because there's a lot I can talk about with sleepy babies and timed feeds, but that could be another video. If you're interested, give this video a thumbs up or comment down below and I'll know to make one of those. Another thing is try not to give any of those artificial pacifiers. And I know that's one of the hardest ones, even for myself. I still bought those pacifiers that I showed in one of my baby hauls. It's hard not to give those because they do cry and fuss a lot. But if you want to have a long breastfeeding journey, trying to eliminate those early or not giving them until breastfeeding is fully established, which is about usually 8 weeks is when breastfeeding is like nice and established and your milk supply is nice and established. Even still, it could be closer to, 10 weeks. It could be 6 weeks. It really depends on you and baby. I really don't believe there's like a set, oh yeah, at 8 weeks you should be perfect. Like that, no, like that's not how anything works. So, you know, when breastfeeding is fully established, when everybody, mom and baby, both feel confident in breastfeeding, it's going well, baby's gaining weight, mom feels like she has a good supply, that's usually when you can kind of introduce the pacifier a little bit more. That being said, a lot of times they do give pacifiers to preemies because it can help prevent SIDS, because there's always kind of something going on. I'm not against the pacifier. I just say be cautious with the pacifier and don't use the pacifier to replace a feeding. My advice with the pacifier is just be cautious with it. Another thing that I love is breastfeeding support groups. I think we should encourage more mothers to do that. It's a really great support system. Even if you go once a week, once a month, whatever, just look into a breastfeeding or a mother support group. It's so helpful. Or, you know, just any parenting support group can help immensely. I remember with my first son, I could not wait each week to go to that group because I was like, oh my God, I have so many questions. I don't know how to do this. How do I make him stop doing that? How do I make him do this? And how do I do that? And then I would get to the group and he would nurse perfect. And I would instantly be like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Well, okay. My son just came in here, so I'm not 100% where I left off, but another thing about parenting groups and mothering and breastfeeding groups is that babies tend to nurse better when they're around other babies nursing. I don't know why that is, but I always noticed that whenever I went to the breastfeeding groups, my children just nursed so much better. There was rarely like the frustration, the crying or something. I had more confidence as a mother because I saw other mothers having a frustrating time too, and I'd be like, oh my God, like that happens too, you know? Or they would ask the same questions that I had, and I would be like, wow, okay, like this is great. So I highly recommend that you check out a breastfeeding or parenting support group. With COVID, virtual groups are great. It'd be even better if it was something in person, but a virtual group can still be super supportive for breastfeeding. I want to just touch on a couple of like my personal points now. My thing, I think, is I'm a little biased of this, but I think that every mother who wants to breastfeed should have a pump or some type of pump, either the Haka or a manual pump, maybe an electric pump, just something, because you never know what might happen. Like maybe you have a complicated birth and you can't have baby skin to skin right away. That pump can totally be used, you know, to stimulate your milk and to keep that breastfeeding journey going. And yes, at the hospital, they usually give you a pump, but you usually don't get to take that pump home. So if you bring your pump to the hospital and start using it there, then by the time you get home, you're like, oh yeah, I know how to use this pump because I used it at the hospital and the nurse helped me do it. Where if you use the hospital pump, which it's totally fine if you do, like no judgment there, you use the hospital pump, but then go home and you're like, wow, you know, I'm huge on this side, or you just want to have a stash. You start using your pump and you're like, I don't really know how to use this. And then there's kind of this panic. It's kind of nice to sort of get things out of the way and like get those learning curves over with if you can in the beginning, so that by the time you come home, you're sort of like, okay, like I got a little building block under me that I can fall back on if I don't, you know what I'm doing, and I got my book over there or my online, you know, education. Laviemom is a really great online resource for breastfeeding. You know, you have some areas to go to, and just saying that really sticks with me that involves breastfeeding is natural, but it's not instinctive. And that is perfect because breastfeeding is natural. The baby naturally wants to go to the breast. You naturally will want to put baby to your chest and on your breast. But instinctively, you don't exactly know, you know, how to position head and how how to get that perfect latch. So that's where the community, that's where all that support, that's where that education needs to come in. So one other thing that I wanted to touch is in the Breastfeeding Answers Made Simple book. There's a section in here on signs of possible ineffective breastfeeding. And I just wanted to touch on some of these because I think it would be good to sort of have a little comparison on, you know, how to know if breastfeeding is going well and how to tell if it's not. Some of the things to note if baby is doing well at breastfeeding is you hear gulping, you see swallowing, there's good output, so diaper output, like they get at least 4 stools a day, and every diaper that you go to change is wet, so I think it's like about 10 to 12 wet diapers a day, and you want them to be feeding about 8 to 10 times in 24 hours at the breast exclusively. And I do want to note that this is all for exclusively breastfeeding babies. The other big thing to note if baby is getting enough milk and doing well is if they're satisfied. If they're constantly crying and colicky, like that's not really a sign of satisfaction. Like sleepiness, yes, but like you really want to see those open hands. You really want to see that relaxed, loosey-goosey look on babies. So some of the signs of possible ineffective breastfeeding are no swallowing. And so sometimes what will happen is after 1 to 2 sucks, they'll swallow less and less because they're kind of getting tired at the breast. Baby never seems satisfied, and mother always says, you know, baby feeds all the time, like I never get a break. And shallow breastfeeding, so the nipple lands in front of his mouth and his jaw appears narrow, you really want an asymmetrical latch, which I do want to do a whole video on how to get a really nice asymmetrical latch. So comment down below if that's something you want to see. Coughing or choking at the breast, a lot of times that's from a strong letdown or baby having an uncoordinated suck and swallow ratio. So, you know, just something to kind of keep in mind. Low or high muscle tone, so low tone babies can have neurological impairments or Down syndrome. High tone baby may actually arch away from the breast. So if you're seeing a lot of arching, just like a lot, like even in their back, not just their neck, that's a sign that they have a high muscle tone, and there could be some problems with breastfeeding that could come up from that. Clicking sounds, which usually means that the suction on the breast has been broken. A breastfeeding issue if they're not gaining weight. Some babies do click just with their tongue, but they're still latched on. If it's creating pain, then it's definitely not a good thing, and you should reach out to a lactation consultant or an La Leche leg leader. Cheek dimpling during feedings indicates that a baby's mouth is empty and can occur with or without loss of suction. With good weight gain, not much of an issue though. So a lot of these kind of come with the ticket of if there's no weight gain or not good weight gain, you know, this is kind of an issue. Nipple pain or trauma can be due to shallow breastfeeding, unusual tongue movements, or a tongue tie. Tongue tie is like, that's a whole nother video I could do. I'm not gonna touch too much on it in here in this video, but I highly encourage parents to check for ties in the first like 2 to 3 weeks of breastfeeding. It never hurts to have it checked out because it's so much easier to get it revised when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks old than when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And a really big one is breast fullness or reoccurring mastitis. So after breastfeeding, your breast should always feel like empty or not as heavy. You know, you should be able to tell the difference on each side, which one you kind of started with. And if you're constantly always having fullness after they've breastfeed for like 30 minutes, there could be a suction issue, a latch issue. There could be a lot of things, but that's kind of like a flag that could go off to you being like, oh, you know, something might not be quite right. Those are just some things that can tell you that breastfeeding's not going very well and that you might need some extra support. So I think that's pretty much it for some tips on successful breastfeeding. If I forgot anything or you guys feel like there's other stuff, definitely comment them down below. You know, I love hearing like other people's ideas, and there's tons of other things that can help you with successful breastfeeding, but a lot of it is just keep nursing, keep putting baby to breast. If you're getting pain, take baby off and adjust your position. Position is a huge thing. I'll link a couple great position links down below for you if you're looking for that, but I could do a whole video on that as well. I just wanted this to kind of be like a general tips on successful breastfeeding, but if you want any other breastfeeding related videos or latch videos, definitely comment below and I'll know to do those. But I just want to thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I hope that this video helped you, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.